Hi everyone, Kieran Stone here. The video I have for you today is based on how to make very selective adjustments to very specific areas of your image using groups within groups and having layer masks associated with those groups. I'll show you what I mean, but first we need to work out which area of the image we want to adjust. So let's try and be really specific here and say that we want to adjust just this area of the clouds through here without affecting the blue area too much, and we don't want to affect the really lighter areas. We just want to sort of target the mid-tone region. So first thing we need to do is make a selection of the whole sky, and to do that we're going to use our 1 tool, and you can click on your 1 tool here or press W and just draw across the sky, and Photoshop does a pretty good job of just selecting the sky. We're going to make it a bit more refined by going up to Select and Mask, and then choosing this tool over here and just changing the size of our brush just to make it a bit smaller. We're just going to trace along the edge here just to tell Photoshop to do a better job at masking that area. I'm just being a bit rough here. You can be as precise as you want to, but you probably don't want to watch me just trace lines, so I'm just going to do it quickly. Okay, once that's done, okay, now we'll have a selection of the sky, and we're going to make a group and add a layer mask to that group based on this selection. So if we go down here to our group button and then our layer mask button, we've attached a layer mask to that group. So anything you do within this group is going to be subject to that layer mask. So any adjustment you make will only affect the sky and not the rocks and anything else. So our next step was to try and make a mask that would cut out a lot of the blue area. So to do that, we can go to our channels panel and make a selection from our blue channel. So our blue channel looks a bit like this. So anything that has less blue in it is going to be darker, and anything with a lot of blue is going to be lighter. So majority of that sky and some of that cloud is going to be affected, but we'll see how it goes. So to make a selection from our blue channel, we just need to hold down Control and click on the blue channel, and so that's given us our marching ants in our selection. And now if we go back to our layers panel, and within this group we're going to create another group and make a layer mask to that group, and we're just going to drag this group inside our other group. So now we've got a group within a group, and anything in group 2 is going to be subject to both of these layer masks. So anything here is not going to be affected because it's been blocked by this layer mask as well. Now this is our blue channel, and we want an anti-blue channel here so we can mask out some of that area of the sky. So all we need to do is press Control I while this mask is selected to invert that mask. So now you can see that we're going to have some of the cloud coming through here, but a bit less of this blue area around here. Okay, our next step was to just target some of the midtones. And I'm going to create a broad range midtone mask, just so you can see a couple of different luminosity masks and how to make very specific ones. So if we go back to our channels panel, to make our first luminosity mask, we need to go to our RGB channel, and to make a selection from that, hold down Control, click on our RGB channel, and then our layer mask button down here. We'll create a new channel based on what's going to be our highlights, but we want to go to our lighter lights, so we can end up subtracting that from the entire image to just sort of give more of a broad range area of the midtones. So in order to get the lighter lights, we're going to take an intersection of the mask with itself. So this will pick all the pixels that are common to both masks, and since it's of itself, it's just going to be a more specific area around what's really light here. So if I hold down Control, Alt and Shift and click on the layer mask again, it'll give a more refined mask or selection there based on the highlights. And clicking down here at our layer mask, and we have more of the really highlighted areas here. Now to create our shadows, because we'll need to subtract that from our entire image as well, we're going to just deselect our selection here, go back to our RGB channel and make another selection from that, so holding down Control and click on there, make a new layer mask, and then with that selected, we'll just deselect this selection here first, and to get our shadows or our darks, we're just going to press Control I to invert that. So now everything white here will be the really dark areas, and the black parts here will be our highlights, which means that this is a shadows or a dark channel or layer mask. But to get our darker darks, we'll need to hold down Control and click on this channel, then Control Alt Shift to take the intersection of that one again and create a new mask. So now we have our darker darks. Now to get our midtones, what we're going to need to do is subtract our lighter lights and our darker darks from the whole image, and that'll give us our midtones. So if we have a look at our histogram up here, let's just go back to our RGB, and I'll just deselect that so I've got the whole thing. So we're going to be subtracting this area from and this area, and so we're just going to be left with the middle portion of the image. So to make a selection of everything, we just need to press Control A to select all, and then to minus these two areas, we need to press Control and Alt, and you'll see the little minus come up on the cursor there, and then click on our lighter lights and our darker darks, and if we create a mask here, we'll have a mask of our midtones, a broad range midtones. So now with that selected, we'll go back to our layers panel, create a new group, add a layer mask to it, and throw that group within there. So we've got this kind of InGrouption thing going on here with groups within groups. And anything that is in group 3, any adjustments you make there will be subject to all 3 layer masks here. So let's see what that means. Let's add a adjustment layer. Let's do a curves adjustment layer, so we can maybe darken a bit of these clouds and put a bit more red into them as well, just to give them a bit more color. So with our curves adjustment layer, if we just bring that down, it's not going to make a huge difference with this adjustment because we've got a few different masks affecting this at the moment. And I'll just go into our reds and just boost that up a little bit. I just don't want to go too far. The adjustments you make will be a bit bigger than normal just because there are so many masks. But as you can see here, I'm kind of changing the top area here, and let's just refine that even further. And with our layer mask associated with the adjustment layer, let's add a gradient to that. So by pressing G or selecting a gradient, just change that to normal white to black, and then maybe start at about in the middle. If I hold down Shift, I can make a nice straight gradient. So if I go left to right, it won't move around too much or at all. And about there. Actually, I want a bit more in those top clouds there. So about there looks good. So after all that, we've just made that slight adjustment to those clouds there. So not a huge deal, but it just sort of shows you the extent to which you can go to make very specific adjustments to very specific areas of your image. And just to help you visualize what's actually going on here, I'm going to take an intersection of all these layer masks to show you just what area is being affected if I was to make a single layer mask instead of all these groups. So if I take that selection, intersect it with everything, and it's going to give me this little warning saying less than 50% of pixels, or no pixels more than 50% selected. And I'll just create an adjustment layer to have that layer mask show up. So this is the only area, these kind of muddy grays here, that are being affected by that adjustment layer. So that's the effective layer mask by having 4 different ones stacked on top of each other. And if you're wondering why go to all this trouble just to create one layer mask or one adjustment layer after all that, well, at any one of these points you can go back in and make adjustments within each of these groups. So if you wanted to make an adjustment to the entire sky, you could put an adjustment layer in there, and that would affect the entire sky. Or you could even use some of these layer masks for other groups. So you can create a new group, and if you hold down Alt and drag this layer mask up to this other group and invert it, you've now got a layer mask that is going to be selective for all your foreground and everything but the sky. And this can be handy if you're wanting to do any sharpening later, where you don't want to add any sharpening up in the sky area. And you can also go back to your channels. You can pick any of your luminosity masks that you've made. So if you wanted to change the highlights within this front region here, you could create a new group with that highlights layer mask, put it within your foreground group, add another adjustment layer, and now you're affecting just the highlights within that foreground. Well, as you can see, there's a lot more you could do throughout all here and pick and choose exact areas that you want to adjust all throughout your image. If I give any advice, it'd just be, don't just go creating groups all over the place. Have something specific in mind that you want to target before you start. Otherwise, it can get a little bit confusing, and you're just creating groups for the hell of it. So I hope this has been helpful for you, and I'll see you next time.